Hello, it's Marianne Hobbs. Thanks a lot for listening to this interview with Gary Numan. It's a really good one. He talks about Asperger's, expulsion from school, being betrayed by his friends, and Game of Thrones too. And if you listen right to the very end of this extended online edit, there's a bonus part on Gary's favourite guitar, especially for you. Six Music.
The key of life.
So it's Marianne Hobbs, you're locked on BBC Radio 6 Music, and I'm absolutely thrilled to bits that just across the desk from me this weekend is the one and only Gary Numan.
Oh, yeah.
It's lovely to see you, Gary.
Thank you very much, thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about your youth, growing up in Hammersmith in West London, right?
Well, I was born there. I never actually lived there. My parents lived out near Heathrow Way. In various little places when I was growing up. So I still think of Hammersmith as, like the Hammersmith gig, I think of that as sort of homecoming because I was born there. But yeah, never actually lived in Hammersmith.
What were you like as a kid?
I was trouble, apparently. Not through any kind of malicious intent, but I had Asperger's. And so I had found it difficult to socialise and to interact with people. So I was quite a loner. I was bright, so I did my 11 plus and went to grammar school, but then it all started to go wrong. So I think in many ways I was something of a disappointment to my parents. I never fulfilled my opportunities, I guess, from what school would indicate I was heading for. Luckily for me, the music thing worked out very, very quickly. Up until then, I'd let them down pretty badly, I'm afraid. So I wasn't a fighty kid. I didn't go out and cause trouble or anything like that, but I obsessed about music and the few other things I was interested in. Aeroplanes. I'm quite geeky about aeroplanes. And so I actually felt very bad about that for a long time. I got expelled from the grammar school for behavioural problems. They sent me to a child psychiatrist in London for a long time to try to figure out what was going on.
What was that experience like?
Well, I just thought it was good work getting off school. I didn't sort of relate to the importance of it. You wouldn't, I guess, when you're a kid. They put me on Valium and another drug called Nardil for about a year to keep me calm. I used to get angry and stuff. And then as that faded, this obsession with music really started to kick in. And then school just seemed to be getting in the way. As a kind of a peace offering, I went to a place called Brooklands College in Weybridge to do a general O-level course, so I would come away with something. But I got expelled from that as well. And so it was just a disaster. At one point I was kind of like the shining light of the family. I got to grammar school and everything was going to go great. And then I just completely ruined that because of the Asperger's thing, I guess, and ambition and so on. For a while I felt really badly, but my parents were fantastic. They still put everything they had into helping me do what I wanted to do. So they paid for my first recording sessions. They bought me a great guitar when I was 16, a Gibson guitar. I was the only one in my school to have a Gibson guitar. So I was massively spoiled. But that support gave me the opportunity to make the demo that got me the deal with Beggars Banquet. A few months later, it got me to #1. Thanks to them, everything else happened, everything.
So in spite of all things, they could see how fixated you were as a kid, and they were fully willing and able to support you.
Yeah, well, able, I'm not so sure. I found out later that they'd actually put everything they had, everything, their savings, everything, into getting me this little PA system and a van so that I could tour around. My mum and dad wouldn't know good music from a kick in the face, to be honest. They love country and western. So what does that say? They just did it out of love, and support. Much the same as I would for my children. I hope they do this. Actually, two of them are great little singers already. But if they want to go into music, then I will support them 100%. But if they want to do anything else, then I would support them just the same. It's a love thing, I think, more than recognising any kind of ability.
Tell me about the experience of first learning how to play.
I'm not sure I ever really learned how to play it properly. I'm a terrible guitar player. I can't play much at all, really. I'm more an arranger of noises. My fascination with music has been more from making sounds, which is why I think synthesising music appealed to me so much. It was less about technique, which I was never any good at. Could never do scales and solos and all that sort of stuff. I was always interested in noises. I was a basic guitar player at best. That's all I've ever been. But it was great, when you first start to be able to make songs. It's quite a cool thing, My family, my nanny in particular, used to moan at me all the time because she said, why don't you play something we know? I said, I don't want to. I don't want to play stuff, you know. I want to make up my own songs. And that wasn't me being rebellious. That was a natural inclination from very, very early on. I just wanted to make up my own tunes. It's always been my thing, you know.
Tell me a little bit about the very first band you were in, Mean Streets. What do you remember about them? You were 19, right?
Yeah, that was interesting. I think we did 3 gigs and there was a different name each time because you know everyone had an opinion, and that kind of taught me from early on that if you're in a band and everyone has an opinion, it's always going to be a compromise, and that just doesn't work. If you've got your own ideas, do your own thing. I found out I wasn't in Mean Street anymore when I turned up at a rehearsal and there was somebody else there already singing. Nobody had the bottle to tell me they didn't want me in it. So that was quite a surprise. These are my school friends as well, so I felt a little bit let down. But nobody wrote songs. I was the only one in the band that actually wrote any songs, and I think that started to annoy the others very, very quickly, which I couldn't really grasp because they didn't write songs. So what was your problem? It was all very childish, you know, it was teenagers just bickering and being silly. Anyway, but that was enough for me to get a little bit more serious about it and start to put my own band together and just go my own way with things, really.
Tell me a bit about your ambitions at the point at which you put Tube Way Army together. I mean, were you kind of thinking, I need to change the world?
No, honestly, God, I never have ambitions like that. I just wanted to enjoy my life. I just want to get as much out of life as possible, really, without hurting anybody. Get as much as you can from every day. Don't hurt anybody, and then die. I don't have any spiritual belief. I don't believe in God. I don't believe in life after death. I just want to get as much out of this as possible. Up until the children, it was just about getting as much out of it for me and my mum and dad and brother, and then Gemma, my wife. And then the children come along and everything shifts to them. But that's it. I'm not clever enough to change the world.
Nonetheless, you were moving into a really, really different kind of space with sound, weren't you, with Tube Way Army? Something that had never really been achieved before, something that had never been done.
Yes, you know, with the synth and the technology that followed it, sampling and so on. People like me that were doing it back then, we were just approaching music from a slightly different angle. You know, because it was sound-based rather than technique-based. But nonetheless, it had melody, it had all the requirements that conventional music needed. We added another layer to what there'd been before. So in a sense, it wasn't entirely revolutionary or even massively experimental, but it added something. To some degree, the way I found synthesizers helped that. So rather than any sort of great credit coming to me, when I went into a studio as a 3-piece punk band and there was a synthesizer in the studio already, I simply used that in a very amateurish way. I didn't even know how to set them up or tweak the dials to whatever. I just fiddled until it made a good noise. It's so amateurish. And you end up with this new mix of instrumentation that hadn't really been around that much before, if at all. Becoming very successful very, very quickly is shocking enough, you know, for most people. But I think when it happens to you when you're very young, it's even worse. When it happens to you when you're with a record company that's only been around for 2 minutes, there's no one there to help you or guide you. It's harder. I had no management. I was looking after myself. Although the band was called Tube Way Army, it wasn't a band at all. It was just me. And so every interview, every criticism, every good, bad thing, whatever, everything comes back to you. I was very unworldly. I had Asperger's, so I didn't interact properly anyway with the world. So all in all, found it a bit tricky, to be honest. I'd struggled with it really, really badly. And I had very naive thoughts about what being famous would be like. It all looked great fun. Money and lovely looking girls on every corner kind of waiting for you. And because I'd been rubbish with girls at school. So all of a sudden it seemed, oh, wow, this is going to be good fun. And some of it is, but there's a whole world of stuff comes with it. And you just have to learn. You know, you learn what to enjoy from it and what to avoid. It can take some time. And while you're making mistakes and saying the wrong things and doing the wrong things, everyone is watching. And everyone is writing it all down and taking pictures and slagging you into the ground for every little thing you say. And you're just a kid. Yeah, you've got no idea. And you're on your own. And you absolutely understand why people overdose. There's a lot going on in a little head for a while. Luckily, in some respects, I think Asperger is probably what saved me. Because I'm able to disconnect emotionally in a way that most people can't, I think. Not entirely, you know, a lot of it hurts and a lot of it bothers you, but it bothered me for minutes or hours. I've got friends or other people who it's ruined their lives. And some people it doesn't bother at all. Some people really do just love it, and they were born to do that. Most of us aren't. You know, for most of us, it's a shocking thing. But you live through it. You know, I've been doing it now my entire adult life. I don't know anything different to this. And I know exactly what I'm doing. and I have done for quite some time. And so I've lived all through that, and luckily, sort of came out of that with my career in tatters at times, but as a person, grounded, down to earth, appreciative, not even cynical, funnily enough. Appreciate the fact that people that were evil to me back in the day probably just genuinely didn't like what I did. Glad it's different now. I even have good reviews now. Never thought that would happen, back in the day. And it's been quite an extraordinary life, but difficult to begin with.
Yeah.
There's a whole load of stuff that you deal with that you're not expecting. Every woman you speak to writes about it and sells it to the press. Every intimate secret you've got is thrown out there because they can earn money from it. You see your best friend do a great big article because he was promised a cover feature in The Enemy or something like that. You're betrayed at every turn by people you love. And, that takes some getting used to, but you get used to that eventually. And that's why I'm quite proud that I've not come out of it a cynic. I still have friends and still believe in them. In a way, you're paid very well for the discomfort. So I'm sitting back wallowing away and thinking, oh, everyone hates me. In a huge, great big house with a Ferrari outside. It's not bad at all, right? I had 3 aeroplanes at one point. That's not so bad, is it?
3?
Yeah.
6 music.
The key of life.
Do you cook?
No, but I don't eat much, really. My entire range of things that I like, maybe 6 or 7 things. Burgers, fries, hot dogs, roast dinner. I like a roast dinner. I can cook a roast dinner, actually. Although not as well as my wife, so she always does it. I like fish and chips. It's always chips, actually. That's pretty much it, actually. So that's what I live on.
That's an appalling diet. You do know that.
Yeah. I'm doing all right, though. I'm nearly 60. I'm still going.
Is there a piece of art that you've always loved that you could talk to me about?
Art?
Mm-hmm.
No. I'm not one of those chin-stroking type people. That's a lie. I just thought of something. My wife took me to a museum of paintings recently. First time I've ever been in my life. It's a man called, I think John Martin, I think it was. That was great, actually. All apocalyptic scenes. I bought one of them. That was quite an eye-opener for me. So I need educating in such things. It's just never been my thing for some reason, and I know that I must be missing out on a whole world of amazing things and gifted people. I just don't go.
Can you dance, Gary?
No, not at all. You ever see my stage? It's appalling. I go from one shape to another in an inelegant fashion. That's as close as I come to dancing. Even when I'm drunk, I can't dance. Terrible. I move around a lot on stage. I'm extremely animated. It looks like I'm angry. Then I'm dancing, can't dance.
Do you have a favourite book or a favourite poem?
I don't have a favourite poem. I have favourite books. If my life depended on it, then I would pick Lord of the Rings. I'm a huge, massive fan of that, and I've read that many, many times. But I'm into there's a genre now that I thought it was called science fantasy, but apparently it's called high fantasy. It's where there's no technology, it's swords and magic and dragons and Game of Thrones type stuff. I love it. That's what I'm trying to write at the moment. I see my latter years, the end of my years, I guess, in a way, writing rather than music. So I'm terrified, actually, when I've been working on this book forever, and I'm scared to actually do it in case I'm rubbish at it. Because to me, that would be a massive ambition smashed, before it even gets off the ground. So I've been writing endless notes for the last 10 years and never actually committing to start the book. I read every day. I read every night for about half an hour to an hour. Can't sleep if I don't read it. Even if I'm reading something really violent, which most of these things are, it slows my brain down from the day to day, and it helps me to sleep. Without that, I just am awake all night.
Final question, Gary. Would you be so good as to pick us a piece of music to play for the audience this weekend on 6 Music? Could be anything you like.
Anything at all?
Anything at all.
I will go for Head Like a Hole for 9 Inch Nails.
Why do you want to play that?
I'm just a massive fan, and Trent's been really good to me since I've been in America. Trent wrote the first testimonial for me for my immigration to get into California, and he's done a number of things that have been very helpful to me. He's made a big difference to my career. Apart from the fact that he's a genius, I'm very grateful to him for what he's done. I'd only been there a week, and he invited us round and introduced me to all his friends and made us all very welcome and gave me a social life within a week of being there. And he's just a very cool man, very cool man.
The key of life.
Tell me a bit about that first guitar. A Gibson Les Paul, that's quite a gift, isn't it?
It is quite a gift, yeah, for a little teenager, yeah, it was great. I bought it, I can remember what the shop, with Tempo Music in Ealing, where we got it from 40 odd years ago. Fantastic, actually. Great guitar. I've had it ever since. I've got it with me now on tour. It's been on every album I've ever made, every show I've ever done. I love it to bits. It's the only thing the longest lasting possession I've had, will ever have in my entire life. And I was kind of the envy of my school friends when I had it. And one day, I had a friend called Gary Stevenson, who used to produce a band Go West, if you remember them. Mm-hmm. Anyway, he was my classmate at school, and he bought a book called The Gibson Story. And it was explaining in that every once in a while a Gibson would go out with some kind of minor imperfection, but they would stamp a number 2 on the outside of the varnish at the top, so you knew it was a second. And I was making fun, wouldn't it be funny if yours was that? And I went home and it did. So my beloved Gibson is actually a reject Gibson as well, which made me love it all the more, actually. It's great. It's an amazing thing. It's got it's been broken completely 3 times. I've had it completely rebuilt 3 times. It was in a flight case once and nobody realised, and they threw a big wiring loom for lighting thing on top of it and smashed it. I did it myself once and I dropped it and smashed the end off. It's been so damaged over the years, and it just keeps coming back. It's got all bits in it now, holding it together. It's got more scars in it than a battle veteran, but I just love it to bits.